It was the dawn of the third age of podcasting, 30 years after the series had launched.
The Babylon Podcast was a dream given form. Its goal, to discuss the place where humans and aliens could work out their differences peacefully.
It's a port of call, home away from home for established fans, newbies, John, Blaine, and guests.
Humans and aliens wrapped in 2,500,000 tons of spinning metal, all alone in the night.
It could be a dangerous place.
Wait, what?
But it's our last, best hope for peace.
This is the story of the last of the Babylon stations.
The year is 2024.
The name of the podcast is
Babylon 5, 30 years later. Hello, and welcome to Babylon 5, 30 years later, the podcast where John Wilson and I, Blaine Dowler, go through every episode of Babylon 5 and the spin-off Crusade and the made-for-TV movies and the direct-to-video movies. Mostly 30 years after the broadcast date. Exceptions are for that first movie and all those movies that came out years apart afterwards. This week we are looking at Season 3, Episode 14, Ship of Tears. Yeah, it's really hard to make ships out of salt water, but they managed to pull it off. All right, how you doing, John?
I am doing all right, Blaine. I was thinking that this week we could have our listeners figure out who is the absolute worst person in their current story life narrative and go humanize them and ally with them against the other bad people in their life. Sounds like a fun idea.
Yes, one that will have no lasting ramifications whatsoever.
Whatsoever.
Yes, in some space franchises that might be the case, but in Babylon 5, you never know what's coming back, but you just know something will every single time.
Mm-hmm.
At least until we get to the series finale. That's the last one where you think, okay, no more ramifications here.
But then they make a spinoff. Dun, dun, dun.
Yes, which they already knew was coming. So, Ship of Tears. So this is one where the A-plot is the overwhelming portion of this plot. There's a minor B-plot where G'Kar is just holding people accountable, saying, Sheridan promised to bring me into your crew. We have kept our promises. The Narns have been here, helping with station security and all sorts of other things. When are you going to keep your promises? This to me takes it to Ivanova. So that's the B-plot in which he does finally get brought into the Conspiracy of Light fully. But before they do that, Delenn feels she has to sit down with them face to face and say, okay, you're going to find out everything that happened and when it happened. So you need to know that to go along with the decision of the Great Council, I had to keep my mouth shut about who was helping the Centauri and how much power they had and that they were coming while the Centauri were bombing Narn.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a difficult truth to hear, where G'Kar said, had I known this at the time, I'd have killed you without hesitation. But it will take him time to emotionally forgive her. But logically, he recognizes the sound tactical choice that was made. And Delenn is impressed with the growth in him and the fact that he was able to accept that. Even if it will take him time to completely forgive her. And that plot line, that finally wraps up at the same as the A-plot. So I'm going to shift and describe the rest of the A-plot first, which has Sheridan out in space, getting checked out of one of the new Star Furies, one of the ones that is actually capable of going into an atmosphere. And he's out there when they catch something unusual on the radar. There's a signal. He gets close, and it's a Star Fury labeled with a Black Omega, meaning it's a Psi-Corps Star Fury. And when he makes radio contact, he finds out that the pilot is none other than Alfred Bester. So Bester says, basically, I'm here to help you guys. Right now, our goals align, so you can either blow me out of the sky, or you can listen to what I have to say.
I know what I vote for.
Sheridan takes a moment to decide, and confuses Bester, who can't see him. He's keeping his distance because Sheridan recognized the Black Omega, saying that's got to be Psi-Corps. So he was making sure he would not be in line of sight, or particularly close to that telepath. Eventually decides to bring him in. And we find out that Bester doesn't know as much as they do about what's going on Earth, but he knows that President Clark has someone whispering in his ear who is guiding policy in the direction of Earth right now. So he hears that they've been referred to as shadows, doesn't realize that that's actually the name of an alien species or the history of that species. But at this point, he doesn't want them to have influence on Earth, partly because he's predicting a war between telepaths and the mundanes, or the regular humans, that are going to have telepaths on top, and he wants to be in charge when that day comes. So he's not okay with some outside influence coming in and taking over, especially one that apparently has a ship out there that may be partly derelict, filled with weapons components. So after some humming and hawing, including a case where Sheridan asks Ivanova to greet him, because Bester doesn't know she's a latent telepath. So she will know if he scans her and breaks his word, which is asking a lot of her, but it's enough that they realize, okay, at this point, he seems to be telling Elise that much truth, since she does not get scanned. So they bring him along in the White Star to check out this other ship, which includes a moment where JMS realized all that time on Star Trek, he didn't think Chekhov ever got a chance to sit in the captain's chair, so he made sure Bester did. He thinks he enjoyed it because when they weren't filming, they practically had to dynamite him out of that chair. He was constantly sitting in it in between takes, but they eventually find the derelict ship, which is being protected by small shadow fighters, which the White Star is able to handle. There is a much larger shadow vessel that's there, but it leaves. It does not confront them, which really confuses them. They get on the derelict ship and discover that these weapons components that they have are what they call blips. So these are the telepaths who did not join Psi Corps, did not take the sleeper drugs, and as a result of those choices, had to stay on the run. And when they thought sort of the last one on board would be the first one off to see what's going on, to check it all out, Bester recognizes the name. This is the woman he loves. It's not the arranged marriage designed between two telepaths to breed more and stronger telepaths that he's officially a part of. This one is actual love. So he's been using his position to try and protect her, even though she's a blip, but it obviously wasn't enough. She ended up being one of several telepaths that were frozen and kept on this ship. And when she gets out, she immediately starts to interface with the computers in sickbay, or medlab. When she thaws out, she immediately begins to interface with the computers in medlab and gets connected to it. She asks Alfred to help her, which is the tip-off to the B5 crew that they knew each other. That was not public knowledge yet. But when she sees his Psi Corps badge, she fires and attacks, saying that that symbol hurts them. And it's actually Garibaldi who puts together it's the Psi Corps and just asks Bester to take his badge off and tosses the badge alone. So they can approach without the badge. Franklin is there to sort of treat her, help calm her down, along with a lot of the other telepaths that they have there trying to help this whole crew. So, like I said, they got her there. They're trying to figure out what to do next. But Garibaldi starts putting pieces together. And he calls for the Code 7R, the meeting with the Conspiracy of Light. And this time G'Kar is part of this meeting. And Garibaldi is there with the Book of G'Quan, which he thumps, much to G'Kar's chagrin. But he has gone back to this narrative 1,000 years ago. He's figured out, yes, the Narns don't have telepaths today, but they used to. They were wiped out by the ancient enemy. And there's passages there that says the telepaths helped G'Quan fight off the ancient enemy. So the last of the telepaths were able to drive the shadows from the Narn homeworld. They're using telepaths, not just as pilots, but as weapons, because that's what they're vulnerable to. So it looks like the Conspiracy of Light finally has a weapon that can be used effectively against the shadows in the upcoming conflict, which is good, because the shadows are now attacking out in the open. They are no longer attacking using the Centauri or using other races. They just came right out and attacked another planet.
Very much in contrary to their earlier goals, because they were obsessing over their secrecy earlier.
Yeah, and as Delenn originally stated, this is how they run until they feel their forces are strong enough that they can come out in the open. They were rebuilding their strength. So now the shadows feel ready to conquer the galaxy. And they've stepped out and are working openly. So they've been promising since the season 3 premiere and that opening credits that this is the year the Great War comes upon us. Feels like now we're there.
Mm-hmm. Feels like. Wow. Okay. It's a lot. There's both reveals and character turns and forward movement of the storyline. There's a lot going on here. And I guess the most impactful moment is when you realize that the screams we've been hearing from the ships are the screams of imprisoned telepaths. And I feel like we already knew at some point that they were people in there. I had kind of forgotten that. So it was like, oh my gosh, they're using people, they're using telepaths. Sort of a big emotional moment for me at once before I remembered, wait a second, I think we did part of that before. But yeah, that's the big emotional crunch of the episode that gives it its title, I think.
Yeah. Yes, this is not a fate you want to see. Even, Ivanova is absolutely not a fan of Psycor, but she would have a lot of sympathy for these people, especially since they would be closer to her mother, right? If her mom hadn't chosen to take meds, she would have had to go on the run.
And there's a big difference between not loving Psycor and wanting everyone to die. Those are two very different levels of disdain.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. And again, these are more the innocent victims, because the people on this ship, these are not Psycor people.
Mm-hmm.
These are the ones who are flying under the radar, possibly deliberately chosen by someone who understands Earth culture enough to know that these are the ones least likely to be missed because they're already flying under the radar and on the run and trying to not get noticed.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the people who love them are going to be way less likely to throw up an alert right away if they don't come home, just because they know, well, maybe they can't come home. And who do they report to? Because if people find them and find out, well, why do you know this person if they're running under the radar? It's just, this is the crew that are going to be least likely to be noticed.
Mm-hmm. So I guess beginning of the beginning, Bester shows up and was not expecting that. He's flying a Star Fury. Everyone's not expecting that. And he actually sounds like he has something other than his own best interest at heart, which, granted, everything he does in this does align with his own best interest, but it also happens to align with some of ours at the same time.
Mm-hmm. So this is very much, as he puts it, the enemy of my enemy is my friend territory.
Yeah. That's a nice idea whenever your enemy is not a murdering, mentally assaulting, really sadistic jerk of the world.
Yep. But Ivanova's got him pegged. She's like, yeah, he'll work with us for now. But what happens next? Right? The second we've dealt with the shadows, now our goals are in conflict again. And he will turn.
Mm-hmm. He will. Had we already gotten the name Alfred on screen?
I don't believe so. I think this is the first on-screen confirmation.
Because I knew we had talked about how we didn't have Alfred on screen, and my brain couldn't remember if we'd actually gotten it, just because, the conversations tend to blur after a while. We've been doing this for a couple of years.
Yeah, but no, I believe this is the first on-screen confirmation that his first name is Alfred.
Okay.
So we'd had it in tie-in media already because someone recognized it, and then he was just adopted.
Which makes sense. Yeah. He seems to know more than he's letting on when he comes on. He says the ship is going to have weapons, but when he said that, he already knew he was expecting to find telepaths on board. I don't think he realized that they were... Well, maybe they weren't all blips. Maybe they were just telepaths of various life experiences. But correct me if I'm wrong, are the shadows mainly harvesting the untrained telepaths?
Yeah, we know very little of this. This was the first time we found out that they were looking specifically for telepaths and not just regular people.
I wasn't sure if I just missed the detail in the episode.
Yeah, so what we've seen, we didn't see a lot of people in those suspended animation cells. The suspended animation tubes themselves had the Psycor logo on them, but the people within them were not wearing Psycor uniforms.
Mm-hmm. So
it appears as though they had some cooperation with the Psycor to put these ships together.
Okay.
And that's consistent with what we saw when they had the season 3 premiere, when Warren Keffer's footage came out because, Kefir used to exist. And they had the investigation and to find out how much they knew. In that private meeting at the end, we found out that, the Psi Corps is involved in this conspiracy with the Shadows, at least on some level. Bester is not at the top of the Psi Corps, but he's closer to the top than the bottom. He is clearly not privy to those meetings with what we heard today.
Right. Less privy than he expected to be or knew he would be. Yeah. I think it's interesting because some of the language they used while they were talking about the policies, because one of the things we have noted about President Clark is his sharp increase of xenophobic policies. And this is in the wake of a president who was already kind of known for being a little bit xenophobic. So his Earth first, humanity only kind of concepts are being sharply promoted. And then Bester is describing Clark as allying himself with these aliens. And it was just an interesting choice of words because that sentence, I imagine Clark would not really like being said about himself. And so it makes me wonder if there's actually some resentment in him and his administration against this alliance that he's using for, gain and benefit, but doesn't actually like that much. I don't know. Probably giving him too much of the benefit of the doubt on that.
Yeah, that's not something we can answer with anything we've seen on screen so far.
Mm-hmm. What's something else you're thinking about on this one?
Yeah, this is one, reading the notes, JMS's goal was to keep a lot of the momentum going in terms of attitudes towards Psi Corps in general, and Bester in particular. It does that well, and part of it is about keeping Bester as a viable threat, but you can't just have him become a two-dimensional caricature, so they had to flesh him out, and that's when we find out that, yes, he's in love with Caroline, and as you said at the start, humanize him a little bit. So I really like that they took that turn with the villain. You still see the attitudes towards everyone. There's still no question that he is a villain.
Right.
Right. At this point, he basically says, you guys are not telepaths, so when the war comes, you're expendable. We're not.
And he turns it into a numbers game that, there are significantly more mundanes, he says, than telepaths. And so it's a supply and demand thing. I mean, human existence is not just numbers, but it seems to always turn into that whenever you're talking about war.
Yeah, like when he reveals that telepathic abilities are somehow heightened in hyperspace, so he can help them find that ship that's lost out there. And Sheridan goes, well, why did you keep that piece of information to yourself? He's like, well, we don't want them putting telepaths on the front lines because we're not expendable like you are.
Mm-hmm.
Not quite in those words. It's Garibaldi fills in some of it, and Bester's like, well, yeah, of course.
And water is also wet.
Yeah. So yeah, there's no pretense that Bester is a good guy. It's just right now it is very much the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So,
and whenever you're going to give your antagonists, your villains, depth and layers and humanize them a bit, it's an interesting game. It can be a little bit tricky because you want to make them sympathetic as a human being and character, and this, can also depend upon the actual character and the nature of the story, but you don't necessarily want them to become sympathetic to the point of the viewer or reader being on their side. Giving them emotions, giving them some vulnerability is not the same as making them likable. And it's not always necessarily the case. One of the biggest examples I can think of in my own fandoms where this has gone all the way to the side of making the person something of a protagonist is Lex Luthor. In a lot of modern Superman and Justice League and Batman storytelling, Lex Luthor is on the side of the angels. And it's a little bit weird because you read some of the older stories where he's very much not. And it's like, how are we supposed to like this guy? And yet a lot of modern stories very much put him in that mode. So it's an interesting, you have to make your choices when you're humanizing your antagonist, exactly how far you want that to go in the minds of your story consumers.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm not as familiar with the Superman mythos as you are, because very, very few people are. But I have noticed the same thing, whereas, with Lex Luthor pre-Crisis, so that first Crisis on Infinite Earths, he was flat out calling himself evil and reveling in it. Post-Crisis, he did a better job of hiding it publicly, but he was an evil person. They wrote a biography of him, like the biography of Lex Luthor, which is kind of funny. They used Trump's biography as a mock-up for the art. Maybe they had some commentary about Trump working in New York and hearing things about him in the 80s. But continuing from there, and then I would say it's probably after Forever Evil, I think, is when he was running the Justice League. Because at that point, they decided that, no, he's just... If Superman had never showed up, and if all the heroes on Earth were human heroes, he never would have become a villain at all. He's just, generally wants what's best for Earth, but with a xenophobic streak.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a different take. I would say that there's room for that interpretation, not as growth from the character we knew, but if they took it that way from another clean reboot.
Mm-hmm.
Right, they could have done that right after Crisis on Infinite Earths. But, I don't know, it feels weird and wrong to have it be a development saying, yeah, that story's in continuity from 6 or 7 years ago. This aspect was there, and we just didn't see it. And going back, it's like, to be consistent, we had to have seen it, and we didn't. You're right.
And you have stories like Metropolis 900 Miles and stuff where he is, deliberately manipulating and taking sexual advantage of people and wrecking their lives. And but yeah, this is not the Lex Luthor podcast, but yeah, it's just an example of what are you going to do with your antagonist when you're telling a story and you want to give them depth. And so I like how in this one, yes, we kind of feel for the guy, but we don't feel with the guy at all. Not even a little bit.
Yeah, the way that this was handled, we get depth added, and we see that, yes, he does actually care about someone. In his mind, we understand that he is the good guy. From his perspective, he is the hero that's out there to save the portions of Earth he cares about. But from the audience perspective, we see, no, you are the bad guy, even if you don't see it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The audience has never given a hint that he might be the good guy. So they did walk that line very well.
Delenn and G'Kar. So G'Kar wanting to be on the council, I can't think of a better word right now, has been cooking for a couple of episodes now. And to have him come in the door, I wasn't expecting there to be this much of an emotional speed bump of him going in. I wasn't entirely sure what they were planning to do with that. Obviously, once they brought up the fact that we knew about the shadows and they destroyed they helped the Centauri destroy their homeworld, and that's going to be a big pill to swallow, that all makes sense. I just wasn't thinking about that at any point in the build up to it. So seeing that here, it was just, okay, that's why they were letting this cook for a little bit, because they wanted to have an episode where it could be given the emotional weight it deserves. And wow, was it? A lot of emotional weight was given to G'Kar's and Delenn's conversation.
Yes, and as you say, deservedly so. Right, this was an earned moment.
Very much. The deliberation that Mira Furlan gives to Delenn's choice of words and the really intense pain that Andreas' last name's portrayal. Couldn't think of that off the top of my head.
Katsulas.
With G'Kar. It was you could tell it was everything G'Kar was doing to hold himself in repose. That he was keeping himself in check, that he was not giving in to the really intense emotions he was feeling. Because we have seen G'Kar rage and tantrum and diatribe his way through his emotions. And this G'Kar has been through a bit of a ringer, been through some spiritual journeys. He's on the other side, not really exactly the same person. And this is one of the first times we've gotten to see just how far that actually is true for him now.
Mm-hmm. This is one of those cases where the choices G'Kar makes would not be the choices G'Kar would have made with the same information in the same sort of situation in seasons 1 or 2.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I said much earlier in this podcast series, at one point I was asked, write down the 5 greatest character arcs in television. And I said early on in that early podcast, 3 of them for my choices were from Babylon 5. Don't think it's tipping my hand too much at this point to say G'Kar is one of those 3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think you said all 3 of them. G'Kar and Londo, and I don't remember who the third one was. Maybe Garibaldi? I'm not sure.
All right, yeah, I couldn't remember if I'd said them, but yes, those are the 3. Although Garibaldi, we haven't seen as much of that yet.
No, we've seen some changes. He was a bit more precarious in the first season, and he's a bit more together now. So whatever changes he's going to go through in the next 2.5 seasons is going to require some collisions, I think, to knock him off his path. But we have 2.5 seasons for that to happen. So
yep, we are just barely past the halfway point. And actually, when we take into account the made-for-TV movies, I'd have to redo the math to see if we are even past the halfway, technically. So if it was just The Gathering and the original 110 episodes, then yes, we would have passed it with, episode 10 of the season. Severed Dreams would have marked the exact halfway of that original plan. But then we add 5 more movies, we'd have to get 5 episodes in. So yes, with those movies done, we technically have 1 more episode before we hit the halfway. Counting each movie as 2 episodes.
Counting each movie as 2? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it does feel, honestly, that we are about halfway through a book, that things have been set up, motivations have been revealed, a couple of dramatic turns to shift the structure of the narrative. I think season 3 marking the halfway point of the storyline and what we've seen so far in season 3 feels very much like a game changer to go into, to finish out the second act and before we go into the third kind of thing. Of course, it's different because it's a 5-act play, but yeah, knowing that we're halfway right around now feels very appropriate for where we are in the storytelling.
Okay.
The motorcycles agree.
Yes.
All right. I'm trying to think. We didn't really talk much about Ivanova. Her reactions all seem very in character. The way the story was written and played for her scene with Sheridan about letting Bester scan her, she seemed to react a bit more strongly than I suspected, than I expected, because what Sheridan is asking is actually a very passive level of interaction. He's just asking, do you feel him scan you? And yeah, as I'm saying that, it's not so much that she has to let herself be scanned or whatever, or interact with Bester on that intimate of a level, but perhaps she's just really worried about her secret being let out. Because if he does scan her, then they're all in trouble. And Sheridan's response said, then we're going to keep him in the brig until he dies, basically, is an appropriate level of response, because they wouldn't be able to trust anything he did after that.
And he actually corrected himself. Instead of throwing him in the brig, they'll throw him under the brig.
Even better.
There was some good interactions with this, particularly Sheridan considering Bester's offer, which, Bester clearly thought, okay, I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse, but maybe he will refuse it.
And speaking of Sheridan and Bester, you mentioned the humorous point along the way that they did for the sake of Walter Koenig and Chekhov, never letting him sit in the captain's chair. But it feels very Bester that he would just walk into the CNC and sit in the center seat. Like, I know it's not the CNC, it's the bridge, because they're on the White Star by that point. But it feels very much in vogue with him to just walk in and naturally, probably without even thinking about it, sitting in the command chair. Because that's what he would do. He's in charge.
Yeah, it was a nice moment for Koenig, because he didn't get that chance in Star Trek, but it also feels like the kind of scene that could have been written if the person they'd cast as Bester had never played on Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's just a Bester moment.
It's very, very much so.
So yeah, if he had been that one-off Inquisitor in season 1, if he hadn't had his heart attack and been cast in a different role, then yeah, whoever they had here might not have been in Star Trek, but I could still see that scene being written as is.
Okay, help me remember. What was the scene he was going to do?
In And the Sky Full of Stars, there were the 2 people who came and were basically invading Sinclair's mind to find out what happened in the Battle of the Line.
That's right, yes.
And Koenig was going to be one of those, but had to drop out to have heart surgery. So they cast him as Bester instead.
Okay, so Walter Koenig was going to be in that role, not Bester in that part of the story. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, I think it works out better in the long run because he is delightful as Bester.
He's doing a great job, so getting him in that recurring role is really nice.
I think I might be running out of things to say. There really were a lot of strong moments here. This is one of the more key elements of the story that we've had of late. I say that in a season full of key elements. So, it's just another one.
It is. I think I'm also running out of things to say, and that's not because there's less going on in this episode. There aren't some, although, compared to something like Severed Dreams, and yeah, there is. But it's just, as you said, it's largely a plot, which is easily summarized. And this is not one of those episodes where you got the ups and downs, where some bits really work, some bits don't. I find it's one of the ones where the whole episode pretty much works. There's not really a lot of peaks and valleys in quality. It's just consistent all the way through. So then there's nothing that really stands out to get a lot of discussion. But that's because it's just consistently solid episode.
Mm-hmm. Strongly told story. Good job. Well done. Full points, everybody.
Yep.
Alrighty.
So is it then time for our last best hope?
Yes. So we define this as the takeaway, one of the biggest takeaway characters or character moments from this episode. And I was really struggling between two. I think I'm going to go with Bester, especially with the moment where he's looking at the wristband and he's just talking from his high and mighty place of, yeah, it's a blip, blah, 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 blah. And then there's something about the encoding or the ID number or something on that bracelet, and his entire affect changes. And he says, Captain, I need to see her. And you realize in that moment that the game has shifted for him. He is no longer speaking from his high and mighty lofty position. He's now speaking as a human being. And that changes the direction of the episode because everything you learn about Carolyn from then on, of course. And just really getting some vulnerability and some depth and some emotional reality from that character was new in this episode. The other one that I'm really struggling against, I'm not going to mention until after you give yours because I don't want to steal your thunder. But for other characters, emotional depth and reality has been par for the course. But for Bester, it's new here. And so that's why I'm going to go with him.
Yeah, and I suspect I know the two you're struggling between because, especially with that little illusion, I am going with the scene between Delenn and G'Kar.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even just one character's moment, but the pain and emotional anguish they're both going through. Delenn is, that she's the kind of person who can logically understand why the Great Council made its choice, why she had to go along with it. But it's the kind of thing where if she dwells on it, she will not sleep at night thinking, could there have been a better way? Could we have saved more? And now G'Kar knows that his people were sacrificed as pawns in the much larger chess game that is the coming war. You can, as you said before, Katsoulis acting through the makeup, the pain and torment he's in, but he has grown to the point where he can accept it, keep his emotions in check for the greater good. It's a concrete example of change that we've seen some of and had some lip service, but this is the first time where we say, no, there's definite change in this character because this would have gone so differently not so very long ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just the acting that those two do. I mean, Mira Furlan's under makeup too, but especially season 2 and beyond, her makeup does not really impact her ability to emote.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, G'Kar's might. And that's something, kudos to the people who made the makeup at Optic Nerve. That Narn makeup is flexible enough that it doesn't inhibit his ability to emote, and it shows.
Or if it does, he has practiced enough to know how to overextend his emotional, facial changes in order to get across the part. I haven't worn that makeup,
Yeah.
so I don't know. But if he's over expressing himself in order to be seen through the makeup, if he has to do that, that just even says more for the actor.
Yeah. And that is one thing I've been saying since I first started watching this show. That's one thing that was really working for me in season 1 when other things don't. Andreas Katsoulas and Peter Jurasik, individually or more especially together, they knock it out of the park.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when they're together. There are people who will sometimes criticize the acting on Babylon 5. I've never heard anyone criticize those two, especially in their shared scenes.
Mm-hmm.
I know people who say that their scenes together were actually the only things they liked about the series. And that's one where they conceded that, yeah, those two, especially acting with each other, they knock it out of the park. I genuinely think that those two should have been up for Emmys, and I don't understand why they weren't.
Yeah. Yeah, my other one was going to be Jakar. Obviously, Delenn does really well in that scene, in those scenes as well, but my Jakar just really stood out for me, and he was my second.
Yeah, Mira Furlan did a fantastic job acting in that scene, but the only real way we know what season 3 and not season 1 is the makeup, because I think Delenn would have handled it the same way if you saw that in isolation. So, shall we give form to the dream?
Oh, wow. Sure. So, obviously, the new reveals of the episode have added a lot to our world. Oh, I know what I was going to talk about with this. Before we do giving form to the dream, let's give form to the back end of the dream. This explains why on Mars they had all of those humans, including Talia, with their Psy-Corps badges.
Yes, back to that comic book story.
Now we know what they were doing with those people back there. They were whatever modifications they have to do, or maybe not modifications. Maybe they're just keeping them in stasis and getting them ready. I don't know. But whenever Garibaldi found the Shadows had a whole bunch of humans in their, dome on Mars, this is why. Because they needed them to drive their ships. And that's a bit of a dot connecting that has not actually been done on the screen, because on screen we don't know that bit of story.
But it's almost like the whole thing is planned.
Yeah, that's just thinking back to the fact that those comics came out during season 2, I think even early in season 2, and here we are almost a season and a half later, and we're getting the payoff for it. That's really cool. I like it when a plan comes together.
Yeah, so listeners, if you skip the tie-in media and our coverage of those episodes just to go with the broadcast stuff, the tie-in media in Babylon 5 actually matters. It's amazing.
And that particular story arc we've referred back to before, because there was everyone come together Garibaldi scene earlier in this season. I think maybe right at the beginning of the season, where we had to refer back to that stuff.
Yeah. So it's definitely all coming in. The comics especially, they've drawn from not so much the novels yet, particularly the next novel we're going to discuss, but we haven't discussed it yet, so I'll leave it at that.
Mm-hmm. But that also has to do with the creative forces behind them. Straczynski was behind the majority of the comic series. He just had editorial approval stamps on the novels so far.
Yeah, and I don't even think it was editorial approval stamps on the final draft. I think it really seems like he was approving outlines, and then he didn't see it again until it was on the shelf in the bookstore. Whereas for the comic series, he was the editor.
And that will change with the novels down the road, because the novels are going to take a shift in how much they play into canon. But for now, they're just tie-ins, and they're fun for what they are, and we'll talk more about them soon.
Yep. Right. So as far as giving form to the dream in this section, yeah, this definitely has ramifications for the future, but they're not hidden this time. Right. We know that, what the shadow relationship with telepaths is now. We know why the Narns no longer have telepaths. There's way more payoff than build-up at this point, now that we're past halfway. So we're learning more about that ancient war and the ancient enemy from 1,000 years ago and how it fits together. Why the Narns no longer have telepaths, what the telepaths mean to the Shadows. We've got a new, but presumably temporary, status quo between the B5 staff and Bester. And that's just with Bester. It's not officially with the Psy-Corps, because they have still broken away from Earth. Right,
because Bester is very much acting on his own reconnaissance and in his own interests whenever he is teaming up with these guys.
Yeah. So yeah, lots of this that feeds into the future, but nothing that would surprise anyone who just wasn't paying attention the first time. At least not that I caught. If you caught something I didn't, let us know. You can do that by sending us email to Babylon5 30 years later at gmail.com.
And we can go ahead and move into our feedbacks, because that's our first method of feedback. So you can also send us notes, more dream forming, insights on the episode, responses to the reveals, by leaving comments on the websites where these shows are posted. One of those is my own podcasting site, which is johnreadscomics.com. And there is no H anywhere.
Well, depending on the comment, you're right.
Well, there is an H in the, and there's an H in there is no H. There are two of those. Anyways, go ahead.
You can also leave comments at Bureau42.com, which is the home of all of my podcast endeavors.
And you can leave a review on your podcatcher of choice. We check Apple Podcasts as a matter of course. If you leave a review somewhere else, just let us know through one of the other feedback methods.
And you can also leave comments on our YouTube posts. So everything here is automatically cross-posted. So you can leave the comments there for us to follow up on. So next time, we are going to do an episode that has a director. I did not mention the director of this one. Sorry. So before next time, stuff that should have gone right at the beginning of the episode. Ship of Tears was directed by Mike Vehar, written by J. Michael Straczynski, and originally aired on April 29th, 1996. Join us again in 1 week. We have 3 more continuous weeks left before the next broadcast break. So 1 week from now, we will look at interludes and examinations.
Oh.
Yes. So that seems like a kind of talky episode, but if we've been watching Babylon 5 to date, we know sometimes talky episodes are important episodes.
And really enjoyable, too.
Yep. So join us for that. Thank you for listening.
And good eating to you.